Blood Moon Rising, Shadow of the Beast, Episode 2. The platoon of warriors watched a grey haze rise from below. Tyr drew a deep breath and said,
Danvik has been sacked.
Who could have done this?
I do not know, but we are going to find out.
Grasping his axe and shield, Vidarr descended the steep embankment and weaved through the forest. Branches stabbed at his body. Dirt flew from his boots. Revenge coursed through his veins. Finding Danvik in ruin could hinder his chances of becoming Jarl. Whoever was responsible would pay. With one final leap, his boots sunk into the mud at the bottom of the hill. He paused and scanned the landscape. A footpath snaked around several pines and disappeared into the thick haze.
Follow me.
Tyr looked over his shoulder toward the army of men standing behind him and ordered,
Ready your weapons.
Vidarr trotted down the path, watching shadows sliver through the trees. His breath formed a thin mist each time he exhaled. The air was cold, bone-chilling cold. Just ahead, a dark silhouette emerged from the clouds. It towered over them, stretching higher and higher.
We have made it to the Danvik wall.
Vidarr whispered.
Or what is left of it.
One Eye added, as he pointed a gnarled finger at the splintered logs protruding from the side. Vidarr raised his shield as he threw one leg over the broken boards. The brittle wood snapped. Smoke thickened from inside the wall. Quietly, he and his men ventured through the gate. Flames shot out of one of the thatched roofs, licking at the peat. Smoke sputtered wildly and drifted toward the sky. Vidarr meandered closer to one of the long houses. Catching a glimpse of something splattered on the door, he leaned in to have a better look. It glistened in the light, gliding a few fingers across the wood. He smeared the dark liquid with his thumb. He brought his hand toward his nose and sniffed. A coppery odor filled his nostrils. Blood.
Look!
One Eye exclaimed. Vidarr turned and saw dark mounds littering the ground. As the mists began to clear, his stomach churned. A deathly chill raced down his spine. His mouth ran dry. Mangled bodies peppered the trail. Broken, contorted, ripped apart.
Something is coming straight for us.
One Eye said, raising his axe. Vidarr looked over his shoulder and saw a herd of sheep stampeding down the path. Their terrifying bleats tore through the air.
Even the beasts are trying to escape.
Tyr said, watching the herd disappear over the hill. Whispers from the warriors permeated the air as they scanned the surroundings. One Eye looked around and said,
This was our slaughter.
Besehkas. It had to be Besehkas.
Bronn interjected. A horrible shriek ripped through the village.
Vidarr!
Vidarr heard the terror in Ingunn's voice. He dashed down the stony trail wielding his weapon. Pebbles ground under his feet. Sweat trickled down his brow. Vidarr turned sharply and spotted her kneeling in the middle of the path. He stopped dead in his tracks. Her shoulders sagged. Her head bowed low. Vidarr advanced cautiously, noticing a dark heap lying close to where she knelt. He dropped his shield and approached slowly.
No man could have done this.
Her voice shook as she stared at the shredded remains of what had been a person.
Part of it has been eaten.
Vidarr, come quickly.
Tyr boomed. Vidarr turned to his army and ordered,
Bran, stay with Ingunn. One Eye, take Harkon and Alric. Sweep the village. If you find anyone alive, bring them to me.
Vidarr turned and sprinted toward Tyr, who was crouched near a smoldering hamlet. He watched as his friend hovered his hand over the ground, spreading his fingers wide. Tyr pointed to a puddle of mud.
Look at this.
Vidarr kneeled and studied the track. Distinct claws extended from each of the 4 toes. The single-lobed pad sank heavily into the earth. paw prints. He held out his hand and compared the size. The track was huge, so huge that it swallowed his palm. Impossible, he thought. No wolf could be that large. Vidarr furrowed his brow.
This wolf track is bigger than anything I have ever seen.
A low growl sliced through the air. It came from the main longhouse. Something was in there. Clutching his axe, Vidarr stood up and quietly walked over to his shield. He snatched it from the ground and headed toward danger. With a nod and a signal, he ordered his men to surround the building.
Vidarr. No.
Ingun said quietly. He put a forefinger to his lips. Tension filled his belly. Every muscle in his body flexed. The beast was in there. Advancing toward the threshold, he noticed that the door had been ripped off the hinges. Smears of crimson glistened on the outside wall. Sweat slicked his palms as he gripped his weapon. He turned and saw Tyr standing by his side. His loyal friend was with him in the midst of danger.
Ready,
he whispered. Tyr nodded. With a quick turn, they entered the hamlet, moving swiftly through the darkness. Broken pottery crackled under their boots. Cinders popped in the air. They turned the corner and slipped down the corridor toward the mead hall. Another menacing growl shattered the silence. Something moved. A huge shadow melted into the darkness. The sound of clawing filled the air. Vidarr leaned against the wall as sweat dampened his forehead. The beast was close. It waited for them.
My lord,
Tyr whispered.
it is in there.
Vidarr shook his head and gripped his weapon.
wait for my signal.
Another snarl shook the walls. Vidarr raised his axe and nodded. He sucked in one last breath and bolted into the room. Vidarr lowered his axe and scanned the room. Silence. He dashed over to the shattered window. It had been broken from the inside out. The beams had been ripped from the sill. Tufts of black fur hung from the wooden pikes jutting up from the debris. Vidarr reached down and grabbed a handful, fraying it between his fingers.
The wolf must have torn out half of the wall trying to escape.
Tyr said, looking around the room.
We must hunt it down and kill it.
Vidarr said, turning toward the door. Suddenly, a quiet whimper flooded the room. Vidarr looked around and saw someone huddled in the corner. He could make out the faint outline of a foot, a shin, a knee. A woman. Discarding his shield, Vidarr gingerly walked toward her and crouched down on the floor. A slender white thigh trembled in the dim light. Dirt caked part of her bare shoulder. Every inch of her quaked in fear. Dark hair fell around her, hiding her face. Without a word, he dropped his axe and reached out toward her.
Vidarr, stop!
Coming June 27th, 2024. Blood Moon Rising. Episode 3. An Uninvited Guest.